So in a strange way, I think, you know, being queer and feeling different at least started to build a resilience in me. I realized I was just going to have to go my own way, kind of make my own path, as I think many kind of gay teenagers do think, and certainly did think then.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 203. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an awesome interview with Rosie. She is a comedian and author and explored non-monogamy for a little while and has taken a bunch of the communication skills she learned in non-monogamy and moved it to a monogamous relationship with, I guess, an open-minded, non-monogamous mindset?
Yeah.
Is that what you would describe?
Non-monogamous strategies in a monogamous relationship.
Yes.
And so it's a fantastic conversation about all of that. And also, as Emma mentioned, she's got a podcast called the Breakup Monologues, which comes after her book, also called the Breakup Monologues. And her first book is called Is Monogamy Dead? So a lot of awesome information and a super fun interview.
Links to all of her work are in the show notes. And
a huge thank you to her for all the work she does and for coming on the show. So thank you, Rosie.
Of course. Before we jump into Rosie's episode, we do have our normal quick announcements.
But we have a bonus quick announcement.
We do.
We have a special guest in the studio.
We do.
Well, we're in her studio.
Hi.
And that's not a euphemism.
Right? Yes, we're so excited. We are visiting Catherine of Expansive Connection, and she has been on the show. We actually went back and counted 9 times. So this is your 10th appearance.
Wow, I feel so special.
Happy anniversary.
Thanks, baby.
You hold the record. Most appearances on the show besides Emma and me.
Right.
Such an honor.
Yes.
Such an honor.
Well, I will say thank you for all of the wisdom you've brought to the show.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And we're so grateful that you've been such an integral part of our show. And we were, traveling and doing some house sitting, and we happened to be in your neck of the woods and came and visited. And we're so excited. We spent the day yesterday out on the river kayaking. And that was amazing with you and your husband and 2 other partners of your husband and yours. So it was fantastic.
It was such a fun, ethical, non-monogamous day. It was just everybody together, and having known you all for 3 years now?
Yeah.
And finally getting to hug you. I mean, that was pretty awesome.
I know. We haven't met in person till just now.
It was so fun. And it was fun because my husband, who some of you may remember, Ray, our episode number
57.
Amazing. And both of our other partners that went kayaking with us were both just like, we feel like Finn and Emma are long-lost friends. I was like, I know, right? They're just so easy and wonderful to hang out with. So we're so glad you're here and guests in our home and got to show you our neck of the woods. It was really fun.
Yeah, I was thrilled. I don't know.
So much emotion in your voice.
Quit harassing me.
I can give you shit.
I'm still waiting for my hug, by the way. I'm kidding. I got at least one.
You got way more than one hug. And if you ever want trail mix, you got to steal Finn's trail mix. It's just the best. On the river, so good.
Also not a euphemism.
No, actual trail mix.
So one of the really exciting things about this is actually yesterday. Tomorrow today, but yesterday tomorrow.
Well, you're really getting... This is coming out on Wednesday, October 13th, and that's tonight. We're doing the Atlanta meet and greet.
Yes. I think I confused everybody.
You did.
Me too. What day is it? Who's on first?
Yeah. So yes, tonight we have a meet and greet in Atlanta, and Catherine is going to be there.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's actually my whole Expansive Connection coaching team. We're all going to be there. And so we're going to get to meet some of the wonderful participants in your meet and greet and your Patreon community. And we are all so excited about the work you do to help normalize this fantastic lifestyle that we lead. So we're just thrilled that I'm thrilled that my whole team gets to be here and meet you guys, and to get to meet some of the people that follow you.
We're so excited. It's going to be awesome. And if you want to know more or come sign up and come join us tonight, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the community events tab. You'll find all of the information for Atlanta there. Also, while you're there, we have other upcoming meet and greets in St. Petersburg Florida on October 27th from 6:30 to 9 p.m. And then we also have a virtual meet and greet coming up on October 26th from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, and one other event that's coming up in Atlanta actually this coming weekend, the weekend of the 14th to the 17th, is Frolicon. We're not going to be able to make it, unfortunately, but we wanted to pitch this because one of the organizers and also the president of Atlanta Polyamory Meetup Group and atlantapolyamory.org is pretty integral in Frolicon, and they're super excited about that. And also they have a meet and greet tomorrow night, so that would be Thursday, October 14th. I should have looked that up before I started talking about it.
It's right here.
Yeah. I'm still learning all my numbers. So we just wanted to throw that out there. We're not really affiliated and we can't make it, unfortunately, but we're super excited and just to have more resources out there. And so definitely check that out. Ways to sign up for that are on our website at normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and you can click on the show notes for this episode, or you can go to atlantapolyamory.org and learn about that. So check that out. Awesome resource. And thank you to them for doing all the work that they do as well.
And while you're on while you're on our website, you can go to the Contact Us button, send us an email, send us a voicemail. We'd love to hear from all of you. And with that, do you have anything else?
I don't know. What about you, Catherine? You got anything else?
Just, I hope that all of your listeners get a chance to meet you guys and have your fantastic hugs and maybe share some trail mix and a beer sometime, because it's been really fantastic for us.
Aw, thank you. We are so thankful to be here and are so grateful for this connection.
Mm-hmm. An expansive connection.
It's so expansive. Nice one.
Also, side note, links to Catherine's business as well will be in the show notes. If you're interested in finding her work, go check it out. And with that, let's go talk to Rosie. Well, welcome to the show, Rosie. We're excited to talk to you today, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. It's lovely to meet you all the way from London here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit later on your end of the world, but nevertheless, we're excited, and we would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself for us, because we just met you about 10 minutes ago, and for the listeners who met you about 17 seconds ago.
Yes, hello. Gosh, it's quite a new relationship, isn't it?
It is brand new.
New relationship energy is all buzzing around. So I'm Rosie, and I am a comedian based in the UK. And I have been investigating the psychology of love and relationships for my comedy shows for the past 10 years or so. And that has taken me on quite a journey that has taken a more serious turn and a more thoughtful and deeper turn, as well as just the sort of pure fun of performance and exploring ideas on stage. And this particularly began when I took a show to the Edinburgh Fringe called Is Monogamy Dead? In 2013, when I was really looking at my life as a serial monogamist and really looking at what our conception of monogamy in our modern day society really was, and whether it needed a bit of a revamp and rethink, and whether it needed to be redefined a little. So I interviewed a number of friends who were opening up their relationships and who were becoming part of the poly community. And I was really excited to discover a whole new world of thinking about relationships differently and more consciously and compassionately. And I was really excited by the kind of level of communication that was going on among my friends who were poly in some way or non-monogamous. And I was really excited firstly about trying non-monogamy for myself, and then latterly about how I could go back to monogamy but actually incorporate some poly values. So in a strange kind of way, I think you can sort of simultaneously be mono and poly. I don't think they're necessarily complete polar opposites. I think you can be in a monogamous relationship in the way that society would define it, in that maybe you're sexually exclusive. But I also think you can have a lot of poly values about how you go about that. Maybe you have other important emotional connections with other people. I mean, all of us have friends, right? You know, and other people that we love and care about, and well, actually non-humans as well. We have a dog and 2 cats, and those relationships are very important too. And you know, I think there are ways of thinking about relationships that the poly community does really well, but that we probably need to incorporate into our monogamous connections also. So I guess that's where I've kind of been coming from. And it was really inspired by investigating something for my work as a comedian, as a performer, as a writer. And that has really taken on this kind of huge life because Is Monogamy Dead, the comedy show, became my first book, which was published all around the world, and I narrated the audiobook as well. And then I started thinking more about breakups as well, and how we can do those more consciously and compassionately, and how polyamory informs the conversation about breakups, and how when we have more ethical breakups, like a sort of conscious uncoupling model of breakups, how it is a sort of poly breakup in a sense, because we are remaining friends or remaining in close contact with that person and maintaining some kind of connection with them because we shared that important history and we value that. So that led to me doing a podcast called The Breakup Monologues, which is also now a book. So it's funny how I guess my creative work has informed this real journey that I've been on in my personal life, and how I've moved from a relationship where very tentatively we were talking about opening it up because we had a lovely connection, but perhaps it had become less sexual than maybe we would have wanted. And I think in quite a sort of sexual and sexually driven society where the sort of discourse about sex is so vivid and strong, and there is this kind of thinking that if you're not having sex, your relationship is somehow bad or wrong and that you should leave it. You know, I really wanted to explore how to have some connection with a sexuality, with my sexuality, as well as maintaining a relationship that had lots of wonderful things about it, even if maybe we didn't have that deep, strong sexual connection. And I think that was a really interesting question for me, was how that seems to almost be the most important thing that, you know, in our society, we place this really, really high value on that sort of erotic and romantic and sexual type of love and that type of energy, which doesn't always last forever. That really energized state in a relationship is often, you know, the early part of it, and then it fades a little. So it leaves us with an interesting question about how we categorize and value the other stages of love, the other parts of the love that go into connecting with a partner, the companionship, the friendship. So yeah, ultimately the relationship I was in when I started on this journey did consciously and amicably end, and we are still friends, and I do still often see my ex, and she gets on well with my current partner as well, and yeah, we all hang out, and she's just met somebody new, and it's actually an old friend of mine, so that kind of makes it all quite interesting, and it's, you know, it's fun to all hang out. And so, so ultimately I came back into a monogamous relationship, but I think with a whole load of new information about how I wanted to be in a relationship and communicate.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. That was a wonderful introduction and overview. And there's so much that we can dig into there. I think what would be helpful is to hear a little bit about maybe your history of what have your relationships looked like up until you started down that the Breakup Monologues path back in 2013 and kind of an overview, I guess, of your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess the really critical thing that people may well have picked up on already is that I'm a gay woman and that my relationships have been with women. And that, I think, has hugely informed how I've gone about relationships and dating and love. And I came out, so I'm 50 now. I've just recently turned 50. And so I came out right at the end of the 1980s when I was like 18, 19 years old. And I'm sure it was the same for you there, but that was a pretty homophobic decade.
Yeah.
Yes.
Things were not really ideal for queer people. We had very, very homophobic policies brought in by our government. You were not allowed to talk about gay families or being gay at all in schools. It was thought that that would sort of corrupt young children. So there was this real backdrop of real homophobia. And so I was, I guess, in the closet at school and really dealing with a lot of angst about feeling different and feeling like I was, something that was seen as bad or wrong. But luckily, my mum, sadly, she's no longer around, but she was quite a progressive feminist woman and who, always said that she might have been a lesbian in a different era. So she was pretty cool about it and pretty embracing, almost to the point that I have chatted about her in my comedy shows and, said how embarrassing it was that she embraced it so wholeheartedly, and was running around telling all the neighbours and all her friends that her daughter was a lesbian and was so excited about it, which was very much sort of at odds with this very homophobic time. So yeah, and she used to tell me about her close female friendships as well, and her friend Joan that she'd been very close to, who she'd often been on holiday with, and then when you're a teenager, you don't want to sort of hear your parents talking about stuff like that, and so it was interesting how I think being gay, made me feel like I already had a sense that love, relationships, dating were quite challenging and difficult, which I think in some ways does prepare you a little bit for the challenging, bumpy road ahead. It's interesting how I talk to heterosexual friends and, if they've met someone when they were a teenager and everything's just been a breeze, they're suddenly really shocked if they have a divorce or have a problem when they reach midlife, because things have always been felt so easy. So in a strange way, I think, being queer and feeling different at least started to build a resilience in me. I realized I was just going to have to go my own way, kind of make my own path, as I think many kind of gay teenagers do think and certainly did think then. So I guess you start to make your own rules. And I think sometimes being creative like that about relationships can be interesting. And maybe that's why so many queer people are very open to the ideas around non-monogamy, because you've already sort of made some kind of jump away from the heteronorm and, the sort of traditional structures maybe of marriage and biological families, nuclear families. So maybe you're sort of open to new ideas and structures and concepts. So, yeah, I guess when I went away to university, I had a lot of kind of crushes, unrequited crushes on women, and didn't necessarily have great success. I sort of would still try dabbling with dating boys, even though I knew that wasn't really for me. But there were some nice boys around, and sometimes you feel like you should give it a go if there are nice boys who are interested. But yeah, I do remember vividly at the time in the UK in the early 1990s, there was still this idea about political lesbianism, and this sense that there were feminist women who were not gay, but who perhaps for a time would define as gay and live as gay as a political statement, which I found really confusing when I was young. because I was so madly, I was madly in lust with one of these women, and she had a girlfriend, but, you know, ultimately she wasn't even, you know, sort of gay in that kind of pure animal sex drive, biology kind of sense anyway. So it was really, really confusing. And, you know, so when she left college, she married a man. And so I think all of this kind of backdrop of what was going on politically was quite confusing. And it was hard for me to find my way in the world, I think, until I came to London, which was after I graduated. So this was around about 1993 when I came down to London and found the queer community in London, because I'd always grown up and gone to school and college in the north of England, which, you know, there's wonderful, wonderful cities in the north where I've spent time, like Liverpool and Manchester, which do have some queer culture, and certainly more now. But back then, really everything gay seemed to be in London, and I thought I had to get to London. And so, yeah, arriving in the big city and going to London Women's Centre and sort of queer choirs and women's voice workshops and feminist book groups and discussion groups and queer drama groups and getting involved with all these kind of queer cultural activities really started to make me feel like the queer community was like a family, an alternative type of family. You know, the writer Armistead Maupin talks about logical family as opposed to biological family. And so I'm really interested in that idea that, you know, our friends can be our family. We can create this alternative type of family if we maybe feel that we don't have, you know, large traditional family units. I'm actually an only child, so I don't have siblings. And, you know, my mum died when I was still in my 20s. So I suppose I don't feel I have that big sort of biological family unit. But I think there are different ways of thinking about family. And so I think that really began for me when I arrived in London in the 1990s. And there were just so many interesting queer people doing creative, interesting things, political things, activist-y things. And there were older dykes who were really interesting and inspiring, and they would share their stories with younger, you know, baby lesbians like me. So, you know, and now I'm one of the older queer women, you know, and I can hopefully help and guide younger women, although it's such a confusing world now. Yeah, that was a really interesting time, I think, to get to London and to start having relationships. And it was really in the mid-90s, in my mid-20s, when I met my first serious girlfriend. And we lived together in North London and had a really fun existence for a good few years. I had a band and she sang backing vocals in my band, and we had a really creative time. And yeah, life was fun. Although, yeah, we had to kind of grow up quickly when my mum had cancer and sadly passed away. And we also had a terrible house fire at the time and lost loads of our stuff and our belongings. So there was this real kind of sense of loss around that time. And ultimately the relationship didn't survive, but we really did what many queer women did at the time and held on to a wonderful friendship, which was so important. And I think women often do that, don't they?
Well, I know, like, just from our times listening to Dan Savage, right? And he talks a lot about, you know, in the gay community, right? When you break up, like, there's not millions and millions of gay people in your town. So the community is small. So remaining friends is important, because otherwise you're going to sort of be ostracized from a small community. And so it's not uncommon for you to stay friends with your ex or your exes to then start dating. And it's a smaller pool of people. And so I think there is some necessity there, right? Like, for us, like, as relatively straight people, like, if you break up, like, there's, you know, roughly another 3 billion straight women or straight guys out there that fit the bill, but it's just a different pool of people.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that there's certainly that sense of necessity, I think, of staying friends, particularly when the world was more hostile, I think, to gay people. I think we definitely felt we had to maintain a type of connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for support too, right? Like, yeah, there's no reason to turn on each other if everyone's already turned on you, right? And so I think that's something that, like, I don't know, that we in the straight community, I suppose, that's something that I think is valuable as well, right? Like, just because you break up doesn't mean you have to become enemies. And
I agree. And that's something I think is really interesting, because I do think that, you know, that's sort of a poly approach to breaking up, right? Because you're sort of maintaining a type of relationship, a type of connection with the person. And I feel like that does count as a relationship, because this is something else that I've been thinking about a lot, is that how much we really define relationships by whether you're having sex or not with that person. And I'm not sure how much I agree with that, because there's so much other stuff that, you know, goes towards building and creating a relationship, all that companionship and love and mutual support and connection and history and shared jokes and memories. So, you know, arguably, I think it's still a relationship even if you've changed the nature of it. So you've defined that it's no longer romantic and sexual. You know, I don't know. At what point does it switch off from being a relationship and become a friendship? I'm not sure it's as clear cut as it's being on one morning when you decide you've broken up. Certainly my experience is that there's much more a gradual kind of transition period.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, that black and white piece versus the transition piece is a really important thing to mention, like you said, because it's so easy to think, oh, we're broken up, things have to switch like immediately. But we're all human. We all have emotions, and those transitions take time, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. They really, really do. And I think there are stages in my life, even when I was certainly assumed I was a serial monogamist, there were probably stages in my life when, you know, I wasn't strictly monogamous, because I would begin a new relationship that was really exciting and thrilling and sexual, but still have close contact and hang out a lot with an ex, you know. So it was almost like having two partners, you know, just two different types of relationship, two different types of energy. And honestly, I quite enjoyed those times where there was, you know, a sort of transition. I mean, the only rule that was clear cut, I suppose, was, you know, who I was actually having a sexual connection with. But I'm not sure it is always clear cut as that.
For sure. And you had said earlier that the serial monogamy kind of blended into the time frame when you started talking to your friends about non-monogamy, and you had a series of friends who were exploring that. Had that been something that, like, you had, like, heard of or contemplated, or you were sort of on the serial monogamy, like, break up with one partner, start a new relationship, maybe there's a little bit of overlap but not a lot, and then, like, at what point did you learn that, like, oh, there's this way to maybe do both at the same time?
Well, yeah, I think I was just like searching for various things on the internet, just around the areas of relationships, and if you're not having sex in a relationship, and platonic relationships, and what counts as a relationship. And there were just various questions I was typing in and trying to get answers about, you know, how to, I guess, kind of reconcile this kind of lifestyle that I'd been having, where it felt wasteful to sort of discard a relationship and then move on to the next one, even though to some extent I was not doing that because I was maintaining friendships with ex-partners. But it still felt like this somewhat exhausting kind of cycle of, right, now we're starting again with somebody new. You know, particularly when you're burdened with, you know, the monogamous sort of language and hyperbole about, you know, well, this one is going to be the one that you stay with forever and you're going to get married to and have an amazing home and family with. And this, you know, you're going to have your wedding anniversary gifts are going to go up in a kind of ascending hierarchy, from paper up to silver and gold. And the longer you've been together, the more celebrated your relationship will be. And all of this kind of language we have just feels very, well, kind of oppressive. And it heaps all this pressure onto the new relationship, because you do think, well, this is the one. This has to last forever, and we mustn't ever fancy anyone else, and and all of these things that are not really that likely or possible. I mean, yes, you can stay together, but that's probably because you've negotiated your way around the fact that you often do fancy other people, and what are you going to do about that? So I think I was really questioning this way of being, way of living, way of having relationships, and typing all these questions and asking the internet for advice. And articles started coming up about non-monogamy. And there's actually a friend of mine, a journalist I know here in the UK, a woman called Helen Croydon, who has written a book called Screw the Fairy Tale. And sort of very much along the sort of lines I was thinking of, about how, the fairy tale is a bit misleading and sometimes can feel a bit disappointing. And so I came up, I found some articles that she had written, and we were in touch a little bit, and I ended up chatting to her a bit, and then finding other articles, and stumbling on Dan Savage, who you've mentioned, and his work, and lots of other people, and started actually getting books out of my local library at the time. And there's a funny story actually where I looked up the book Opening Up, which is of course a fairly famous non-monogamy text, and it came up on the library search system next to a book called Opening Up the Bible. Which I just kind of imagined the author of that book probably not being that excited about being next to a non-monogamy book.
I was going to say the person about the Bible probably was not as thrilled as Tristan Taormino was about putting hers next to the
Bible.
Yeah, if you're standing at the bookstore thinking, which one do I pick up?
Yeah. So, and I thought Opening Up was a lovely introduction to the ideas around non-monogamy. And also I think what was particularly fascinating to me in that book was that there were examples and case studies of people who had a platonic primary relationship, and their sexual relationships were outside of that with other partners, maybe secondary partners if they had a primary structure. But I thought, well, that's really interesting, because almost the, in inverted commas, problem that I was experiencing in my sort of rapid rotation of serial monogamy was that the sort of sexual aspect of each relationship would sort of die down after a few years, after maybe 3 or 4 years. It really felt like we became friends. And I know this happens to all the kind of permutations of relationships, whatever people's genders and sexual orientations are. But it's particularly sort of a bit of a cliche in the lesbian community. There's actually this this phrase, lesbian bed death, which is not that helpful, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, definitely helps put away the stereotypes if you get to name it just like that, right?
Right?
There's actually a rock band called Lesbian Bed Death. Did you know that?
No,
did
we
not
did
know
not.
that.
They have song titles like Goth Girls Are Easy, and there's one called She Wants It, Just Not With You.
Boy.
So, yeah, but I do think it does seem to be something that does seem to happen quite a lot in relationships between women. And there may be something about, I don't know, that women do reach that stage of being companions and friends more quickly. Who knows? But I suppose I felt that, a way around that sense of, getting to that stage and then having to break up would be if you said, well, let's, continue to be each other's person, each other's rock, each other's support, each other's, main partner in life. But, can we maybe have an open arrangement where we can see other people and everybody knows what's happening. Everybody's happy. Everybody's okay. Everything is consensual. Everything is agreed. You know, everyone discusses boundaries, their needs, their feelings about it. And I sort of thought that could be a way forward for me, was with my partner at the time, to sort of have her as my primary, but for us to celebrate our platonic connection and perhaps have other lovers outside of that. I think in reality, when I was kind of loosely dating and going out to sort of meet people, I realized that that doesn't necessarily work so well for me, even though that sounded like, in hypothetical terms, it sounded like a really ideal model. It sounded great. And I know so many gay men, friends who do this. I think I found out that I'm pretty bad at casual sex. And, you know, I've kind of talked about and written about this sort of for comedic effect sometimes, because maybe I'm a bit British and awkward about it. But also more seriously, I have realized that I think, demisexual, so sort of on the asexuality spectrum, but I can be very, very sexual with the right person if, you know, I really feel a strong connection, a romantic and erotic connection with them. But it's very hard for me to just sort of switch that to somebody else. So I think, you know, it's not necessarily easy for me to work with that model where I have, you know, my primary partner and then, you know, have more, I suppose, you know, often people would have maybe more casual partners that they didn't see long term. You know, obviously there are lots and lots of different ways of doing this, but that model I was looking at initially, I think would be quite difficult for me because of the way my sexuality works. And I don't think I could have sort of more fleeting connections as my sexual partners. So I was sort of thinking about that and realized that probably wouldn't work so well for me. I still think, you know, I could be poly if there was a way of thinking about it with, you know, kind of maybe other partners who were asexual. But we're happy to sort of define a romantic relationship as a platonic one. But I think it's not necessarily easy to find that. And when I was kind of going to poly groups and poly meetups here in London, even though there was, you know, wonderful kind of communication and there was such an interesting kind of discussion, I did feel that the discussion was around relationships that would have some sexual element. And so I think the sex part of this is really complicated, and that's sort of something we still haven't entirely figured out how to navigate and communicate around. Sex is so, you know, what turns us on is so unique to us. And in fact, I partly for my work, for something fun to write about, but also because I was really curious, I ended up going to a sex lab experiment. You know, one of these experiments, you've probably read about them, where you go and watch erotica sitting in the lab and your arousal is measured and and stuff. So that was a really, really interesting experience for me, because I do think our sort of social and political and cultural labels that we attach to our sexual orientation do maybe differ from the sort of animal instincts that we have. And I think for me, I was quite interested and intrigued in, you know, looking at naked men, for example, even though I don't generally have relationships with men. But it's so interesting, I think, to learn more about our sexuality. And I do think that just, you know, talking to people within the poly community and going to kind of poly discussion groups and relationship anarchy meetings. And I even performed comedy at a sex party, which was really, really fun. Very, very fun and up for it audience.
I bet that would be amazing.
You know, but I think that all just really opened my mind to understanding myself better. And I think that's what I really love about poly, is that there is an emphasis on, you know, getting to know you and your partner and partners as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you had said, I mean, thank you for all that. It's amazing. And you had said that you kind of hypothetically tried non-monogamy with the partner you were with when you started kind of researching this. And I was curious because you had also said in a minute ago that like you didn't think that the casual sex would work and different things you didn't think would work. Were they things that you and this partner like attempted to try, or were they things that you talked a lot about? Like, what did the hypothetical exploration of this look like? And like even those conversations, right? Like it's not just a you decision. It's like a you too. You both have to make this decision together.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And we definitely had some interesting discussions across the kitchen table where it was, initially my partner was really unsure about it. And, and we were both unsure about how our friends in our sort of peer group would be if we were going to open up our relationship. We could imagine sort of being crossed off dinner invitation lists, in our sort of very polite, middle-class, lesbian, middle-aged kind of circles, because a lot of women younger than us who maybe use broader definitions for everything, they might define themselves as queer rather than lesbian, and they might say they're poly rather than mono. They would be pretty cool about all this. But I think in our immediate friendship group, it would still be quite alien, we were definitely not sure. And it was hypothetical, if we were seeing somebody else, what would the rules be? Would you bring someone back here? No, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. Would you... and though you sort of start negotiating those kind of things, and there was a point at which we, said that our relationship was no longer sexual, and we were sort of able to, if we wanted to, kind of sort of connect with other people. And I did have a dating profile online, which was a bit ambiguously worded, but I kind of found I got some quite spiky messages because I was open. I mean, I wasn't ambiguous about the fact that I had a primary partner, but I sort of wanted to make it clear in my profile I was open to either maybe a sort of romantic connection or platonic connections that would be important. But I was looking for other connections outside of that primary relationship, but that primary relationship was important to me and was something I valued. But yeah, there were a few kind of you want to have your cake and eat it kind of messages and stuff from, I guess, more traditionally monogamous women. So it was kind of complicated to even sort of start looking, I think. But yeah, at some of my gigs out and about, there were little flirtations and conversations and brief snogs, but nothing, that was really like actually seeing somebody actively.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fascinating. Again, I think this is to me where people say, oh, well, then you're not really non-monogamous. But like, if you've had the conversations and you both have agreed that like, okay, well, if you want to find somebody, go ahead. And if I want to find somebody, I can go ahead. Like, just because you're not actively like in an orgy doesn't mean you're not like, that doesn't mean you're not non-monogamous. Like you've had the conversations, you've decided like, if you find somebody, then let's explore it. Like to me, yeah, it's not about like the physical acts you're doing. It's like where you're at in the mindset. And so I think, yeah, it's powerful. And thank you for sharing it. Yeah. Yeah.
I thank you very much as well. I'm curious, where are you at now in your relationships? And, what do you see your relationships looking like moving forward?
Well, I am now engaged to be married, which is like...
Congratulations.
Something I never thought I would say. Thank you. So my partner that I met after I had been experimenting with non-monogamy and sort of thinking about it quite seriously. It was interesting. On our first date, I had just finished writing my first book, Is Monogamy Dead? And she asked about the book. And when I said what the title was, she was a bit like, I'm monogamous, and I was okay with that, because I think I had learnt enough about myself to realize that, I wasn't necessarily looking for multiple sexual partners. Like, I do have this one friend who is poly, and she has kind of a boyfriend in every town where she does her comedy gigs, and and they all are happy and know the situation, and that's great. They have other partners too, and I think that's fantastic if that is what you want and if that is fulfilling for you. But I think I'd realized that wasn't quite what would work for me. So yeah, I was cool with that, and we have a really healthy and normal and kind of good relationship. But, I say normal, I mean, what the hell is normal? But I say that because I'm also quite honest whenever I speak about the relationship and write about it, that, we have arguments and we have days when we're annoyed and fed up with each other, just like any partnership, any couple or throuple or, group of people who are together. Sometimes it's spiky and challenging and difficult. So, but I think we're able to communicate about it and we're able to heal from arguments. And I think that's really important. So yeah, it's a lovely relationship. And we have our family with our dog and our 2 cats. And, so we are planning to get married next year, which, I mean, that's kind of something I'm surprised by in a way, because of course, initially I thought that would never be available to me rather anyway. And then when it was legally available in the UK, I wasn't even sure if that was something that we should embrace, because perhaps it seemed like we were, it was this kind of patriarchal construct and maybe it wasn't very feminist or cool to get married. But now I kind of think, well, maybe, if it's available and you have a partnership that you want to celebrate in that way, and legally, obviously, you're going to have some rights that you might not have if you weren't married, and you want to be able to have a party and celebrate your relationship, and you also want to be visible to other young queer people and say, look, you can do this, you can have a relationship and celebrate it in this way that has historically only been available to heterosexual people. We actually did this photo shoot for a magazine here. Well, I think you have it in the US as well, Good Housekeeping magazine. And I wrote an article about lesbian weddings, and they did a photo shoot with us and stuff, and like dolled us up, and we had all our little makeup and hair done, and and it was quite fun kind of writing this really quite queer article for, what I thought of as really quite a traditional magazine.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, along those same lines, like, what are some of the things that the mindsets and the practices you brought from your research into non-monogamy? What have you brought with you forward into this monogamous relationship, and maybe what ways have you seen that help or improve your monogamous dynamic by incorporating some of the mindsets that you brought along?
I think it's all about communication, and respect and trust. And it's just things like, I mean, when I was in my former monogamous life, things like consent and boundaries were just never really discussed, and they so should be. But it was really only when I went and did comedy at a sex party and we were given a list of rules on the door that this is what you must do if you want to be in this space, and not be kind of scent packing. You need to respect people's boundaries, respect other people. You need to practice safe sex. You need to make sure that everything you're doing, is consensual and agreed. And there were just these list of rules that I thought, oh my God, actually those rules are not just for now. They're not just for, this situation in a sex party. Actually, they're really important rules for at any time, when you're in a monogamous relationship. And I think that was really, really important. That was actually a big kind of learning experience, even though, I'd kind of gone along there thinking, it was just a really fun evening. But actually, I really took something on board from particularly the kind of rules and boundaries that were agreed on being in the space. And also they had a PAL system where you had to have another person vouch for your behavior. So you couldn't enter without someone else who says, well, look, if they get drunk or rowdy or are being weird, I'll take them home, So I think there's that sense of accountability and responsibility for one another and looking out for each other in a sense. And yeah, I think that does chime with all my values about community that I was talking at right at the beginning of this conversation, and kind of queer family and queer people looking out for each other. So I do think in a sense, there's, a similar kind of sense of community and connection and togetherness in the poly community as I have often found in the queer community. And there's that sense that, even if you don't, come from the normal, in inverted commas again, kind of family background, or have the traditional kind of, kind of set up in the way that you are in your sexual orientation, in your gender presentation, or, whether or not you're neurotypical, or all of these things. It's okay. There's somewhere to belong. And I think that's what I particularly love about both of these communities. And that's a big parallel that I see.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I think that's beautiful. And you touch on so many aspects that are important in relationships in general. And I think what's neat to me about this conversation is thinking through how monogamy and non-monogamy, both of those can impact each other and impact relationships and overall improve, or maybe not necessarily improve, but force you to think about things differently. And by that exercise of just thinking about things differently can really open your mind in relationships in general.
Well, and two, not even thinking about it, but talking about it, right? Like you and your now fiance, you had a conversation about monogamy and non-monogamy that most people never have. They find somebody, they get together, and both of them just assume we're on the monogamy route. And you're like, well, hey, I have this book. And she's like, oh, wait a minute. like I'm monogamous. And then you have this conversation like, oh, well, what is that okay with you? Is that okay with her? You talk about something that most people just assume in a relationship. So I think there's just so much there that's of value. Even if you're not, quote unquote, actively non-monogamous, you're having so many conversations that most people don't. And it sets you up to be on the same page with each other.
Yeah, I agree. Monogamy, or sort of the old version of monogamy I knew, was so loaded with assumption and secrets. And yeah, I totally agree with that. That it's almost this redefined version of monogamy that I've moved forward with. And it's really been this experience that has opened up my mind to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, maybe it's a good place to give you the opportunity to talk about how you've taken everything you learned and you've put it into multiple books, to comedy shows, into a podcast, and maybe talk a little bit about what all of those different mediums look like and what people can kind of expect from that.
Yeah, well, like I say, my first book is Monogamy Dead, was a mixture of kind of comedy and memoir and some psychology and sociology, and a little bit influenced by Tristan and opening up. I did my own survey for the book, actually asking what counts as cheating. And I asked people if they'd ever discussed monogamy. You were just saying most people don't even have that conversation. And yeah, half of the people who responded to my survey had never even discussed it. And what was interesting was the monogamous respondents to the survey who, answered the question, what counts as, in inverted commas, cheating, that, those results were quite diverse too. So it wasn't just sex or kissing and physical acts. It was the emotional spectrum as well. So falling in love with somebody else, that kind of thing. So I don't know how you even police that, really.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so that book came out in 2017 and I narrated the audiobook as well. And then I began my podcast, The Breakup Monologues, because I'd always been really, really quite obsessed with breakups and how they are good and terrible at the same time. They can sort of be quite liberating and you can experience what I call breakup energy, where you can really go out on new adventures and creative projects and have an exciting time dating again and finding your feet again and finding yourself and finding your own voice in a way that you maybe had lost a little in your relationship. That's when I began the podcast, The Breakup Monologues, where I talk to other comedians, authors, podcasters, academics, interesting people about breakups, heartbreak, how we get over it, what the future of breakups might even look like. And also, of course, a little bit about how polyamory alters the conversation about breakups, how we sort of alter that narrative about relationships having failed, in inverted commas, if they end, and whether we can still, look at a relationship that ends as having been a real success because we've really taken something from it and enjoyed it and it's thrived and been wonderful for the time that it did last. And I think, again, there are people in the poly community who've had more of that kind of philosophy that I've really learned from. And so eventually I took all that I'd gathered from the podcast and learned from that and put that into a book called The Breakup Monologues, which came out a couple of months ago in the UK and is now out in the US and Australia and around the world as well. So that kind of takes some of the best stories and insights and anecdotes from the podcast and merges it with my own story of trying at last to stay in a relationship, having learnt from my serially monogamous past.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And thank you so much for all of the work that you have done, your books and your comedy shows and your podcasts. And it's
especially the ones at a sex party.
Oh, yeah. The comedy shows at a sex party.
Well, I
want to revisit that in a minute.
That.
Yeah. I will just say this. We one of the most awkward stand-up comedy routines I've ever seen. Right after we graduated college, we did a road trip and we went and we spent like 2 days at a nudist resort in Florida. And this guy came in to do stand-up and was looking at me like I'm crazy.
No, I remember.
She remembers this. I have incredible amounts of respect for stand-up comedy because I know I have not done it. I've done a little bit of improv. It is incredibly difficult to get up and tell jokes and if people aren't laughing, right? Like I can't imagine how impossible that is. This guy was horrible. And then he got pissed at everybody for not laughing. So instead of him making jokes, he was yelling at the crowd for not laughing at his jokes. And it just got so uncomfortable that we had to leave. So
yeah, it wasn't great.
So I imagine doing stand up at a sex party would be quite the experience. So yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Did you have questions on that before?
No, just a comment about that. I'm getting cringy just thinking about how awkward it was back then. And that was 10 years ago. So yeah. Anyway, I digress. I apologize. Is there anything that we didn't talk about, Rosie, that you wanted to share out into the world that we didn't ask about that you were...
And just to be clear, links to everything that you just mentioned, all your books, all your podcasts, everything will be in the show notes. People can find you easily. So those will all be there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, well, no, I think that's great. I think I will let you get on with the rest of your day because it's probably it's still the morning there, I think. But we're, just
early afternoon. It's actually early afternoon.
Oh, early afternoon. Okay. Well, I'm just, we're early evening here and, I'll go and join my girlfriend and a friend has just popped over for dinner actually. So I'll go and see what's going on. But
Perfect.
Thank you so much. It's been really lovely. And thank you for your podcast and putting people's stories out into the world. So that's great.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story, for all of the work you do, as Emma said. It's amazing. And yeah, just a lot of gratitude for that. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. And we're back. A huge thank you to Rosie for the amazing work that you do and for coming on our show and sharing your story. It was wonderful to talk to you, and thank you again.
Yeah, as we said earlier, and as Rosie told you about her podcast and her books, definitely check out all of her work. We love sharing all the fantastic resources that are available. And so, yes, thank you, Rosie, for that. And check it out.
Yes. We also wanted to do a huge, huge thank you to our Patreon community. It is an incredible group of people. We're so grateful for all of you. If you are looking for community, we would highly encourage you. We are a little bit biased, but we would highly encourage you to go check out our Patreon community. We have an ongoing chat. We have monthly Q&As. We have women's groups and men's groups, and it's only a couple dollars a month. So if you want to check it out, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the Patreon button.
Yeah, I would just want to echo Emma's gratitude for that as well. This community has been huge for us in the last couple of years, especially going through COVID and feeling isolated. We knew every day we could jump in and talk with our friends and see them at least once a month on Zoom chats. And yeah, it's just been great. So thank you to all of you for being there for us. And we love watching you all be there for one another. Mm-hmm. If you are getting back out in the world and meeting people in person, and there may be a special connection, we highly recommend you get tested for STIs using the service that we use, stdcheck.com. They are an affiliate partner of the show, so you get a $10 discount, which brings the cost of a 10-panel test down to $130. You get your results in a couple of days texted to you, and you can view them in your online portal. It's super easy. It's super fast. We love it. We've been using it for years, and we just can't say enough great things about it. So we highly encourage you to be a sexual health advocate.
Yes, of course.
And get tested, know your status, share your status, and spread the good word. So thank you in advance for doing that and for using the links on our website that support the show and help us keep putting out, what we think are pretty awesome episodes.
Right? Yeah.
And just thank you.
Thank you so much.
To find those links, you can go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the resources tab, or you can look in your podcast player. There are direct links on how to save $10. And again, support your favorite hosts, us.
Woohoo! Next week, we actually have a bonus episode coming out, and we're going to leave it at that. We're going to have to stay tuned and
super top secret bonus episode.
Super excited about it. So just stay tuned. That'll be coming out next week. But we'll also have our normal Wednesday interview.
Yeah, next week's interview is with Jan, who is from Europe.
Yes.
And he is working with a handful of other people online, building a presence to try to introduce a new flag for polyamory.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, it's a super cool project they're working on, and we're excited to get out there, and his story is fantastic as well. So we're excited for that.
Come back next week and listen, and stay tuned for a special bonus episode coming your way. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.